my stats are kind of screwed up and I'm trying to fix them, but it ain't going well. So life isn't a race, it's an RPG, and most of you maxed out the wrong stats. So like, what do y'all think about this? Like, what are the mechanics? What are the rules of life in advancement?
A little background on Dr. K. He does like streaming therapy, psychiatry sort of stuff. So he has a chat of like all these people that play games and stuff like that. They're all about weird, mental health isn't great. And he asks questions. Sometimes he does like interviews with folk. It's pretty cool. A lot of it's raw. It's like real genuine shit. It's kind of cool. As a fly in the wall. So here he's trying to draw an analogy to his crowd. You know, the people. The gamers. He's like, life is a role-playing game and you messed up your build, meaning you've created your character wrong or your character's being created wrong as you've progressed through the game for your role or whatever. Let's see what he has to say. It's kind of a cool premise.
You guys get that? Like, this is an important question. And I think it's a really important question because they don't like teach us what the basic mechanics of how to live life are. So let me give you all an example. So there are a lot of people out there who feel like it's too late. So they feel like, you know, oh my God, like I missed like this milestone, right? Like, oh, I'm 24 and like I haven't graduated from college, therefore like it's too late.
I'm 28. I've went to college 3 times and I quit 3 times before the end, so I never graduated. 3 unfinished courses.
People feel like they screwed up. So there's this concept of like, you know, missed milestones, and then people basically feel like once they miss the boat on something, like you can't kind of go and get it back. So this kind of concept entered our consciousness as humanity when people found these, you know, like the wolf children. So there were some like human beings that were raised in the wild and didn't have access or exposure to human language. And what psychologists discovered is that if a human like doesn't get any access or exposure to language by a particular age, it becomes impossible for them to learn language. That their brain sort of wires in a particular way, and then like a door is forever closed to them. And so the main question is like, is that generally speaking how life works? Like what is the RPG system that best mirrors like how you gain like stats and level up in life? Like what does it actually work like? So
yeah, how does it work?
In general, life is sort of like closest to, for lack of, there may be a better example of this, but like one of these Elder Scrolls games where basically the more you do something, the more you level up in it. So the first thing is like this concept of missed milestones, I think is like not really accurate. So we see this a lot, for example, hopefully this paper will get published soon, but we wrote a paper about incels, where one of the key things about incels,
involuntary
celibates,
celibates,
experience that they have is that there's a missed milestone of social development. So they feel like, oh, I've never had a girlfriend in high school, or I'm 23 and I've never had a girlfriend, or I'm 23 and never had a boyfriend, whatever. And so since they missed the boat on something, they're like forever screwed. And so what the kind of concept of missed milestone is that after a certain point, there's been an unchangeable course correction, which has doomed you to failure. And
I don't agree with that. I think there's always time to like develop. Sometimes it's not your time yet. People take longer than other times, and just because something didn't happen at a certain time doesn't mean it wasn't good for you, you know, or that there won't be another opportunity, and that wasn't really a loss. It's just one of many things that can happen. It does feel like a loss though if it was a goal. I can understand how that can make you feel like a loser.
Therefore, you're like never gonna succeed. And so we see this a lot within our community where people say like, oh, it's too late for me. Like I'm X number of years and I haven't done X, Y, or Z. So like I'm screwed. Right. And so this is another example where people will say like, they'll go back to this kind of concept, which is that, you know, you've spent your time, like you've used your time or spent your time maxing out the wrong stats. So if you spent all of your time like maxing out your League of Legends skill and your, you know, Valorant skill.
What does it mean if you only got to silver and you never ever maxed out, but you played the whole time? That's
brought to you by Riot Games. Are you basically
TM.
screwed? And so the short answer, like in my opinion, like the answer is clearly no. So like, let me give you guys a simple example, okay? So like, let's say like I watch a bunch of anime and I sort of passively acquire some amount of Japanese, right? So if you like watch a bunch of anime, like you've like wasted, let's say 4 years watching anime and like you learn a little bit. There's some amount of like passive XP that you get from watching anime. But people who have gone like 4 years of like watching anime and like may be able to, you know, say things like, you know, I'll never forgive you, or Sekai no tame ni yurusanezo.
Is he talking about himself?
Like you're not actually learning anything. So you can spend like 4 years, and then what people will conclude is they'll say like, oh, I've spent 4 years like wasting my time watching.
Look at the chat.
What chat? Like what do you take me for, huh? You know?
What's your dirt level?
Like what? Did you guys think that I'm a poser? Did you not think that I'm
Wait, how do I turn on subtitles?
You have to remember, chat, that I'm one of you. It runs deep. It runs deep with me, dude. It goes all the way down to the bottom. One of us. So where was I? Yeah. So like, here's the first thing: is like there's some kind of passive XP that you get from like doing what.
Can you adopt
doing, right?
me?
If we live our life and we're just sort of like passively leveling up random skills, like skills at video games or like whatever, right? Learning a little bit of Japanese. At the end of the day, you can actually like gain a lot of ground if you just put your mind to it, and we'll get to that in a second. So just to give you guys like a little bit of context, right, about like how I got to where I am. So I played a bunch of video games in high school. Like I didn't know how to play any sport.
That's facts, yo. Passive XP only gets you to the soft cap, not the hard cap. So you can only level up so much. There's a glass ceiling that you create if you're passive. Fucking facts. Bengado.
Like I couldn't like, you know, I didn't play a musical instrument. I sort of like played a little bit of piano, but you know, stopped playing piano when I was 15 years old. And between like 15 and like graduating high school, like I didn't really learn anything. Like I went to class, passively learned stuff, right? Because you're sitting there in class and you're like passively like learning mathematics.
Yup.
I did the minimum amount of work necessary to pass, or sometimes didn't even pass in high school.
Yup.
And then college rolled around, and then like I was 18, 19, 20. I was like,
passive XP and torture, body disposal, killing, serial killers. Feels like a waste, not gonna lie.
oh, I'm gonna go to college, like, you know, I'm gonna party, I'm gonna meet chicks, like all this stuff. And then like my 20th birthday rolled around. I'd never really been on a date, like never really had a girlfriend. And so like, you know, it was maybe I'd been on something like a date, but and so I felt like I was like falling behind, right? I felt like I'd kind of missed the boat. And even like years later, when I was like 26 years old, so I graduated at the age of 22 or 23. And then like at 26, I remember going to a holiday party and meeting my friends who I used to be in high school with, who are now like doctors. They were like graduating medical school. And so I had like no job, like net worth of basically zero, like couldn't play an instrument. I'd spent some time in India, which I didn't realize was worth a lot at that time. But I basically, like, on paper, I was worth nothing, right? So I had, like, a bachelor's degree in neurobiology with, like...
How is that worth nothing on paper? His self-worth must be... He needs to realize that that's worth a lot. And I guess he did, obviously. But at that point, some of us didn't pass college, bro. We talked about that. We fucking talked about that, man. That's a humble brag.
That was 3 to 4 years old with like
see what
no
chat
work
says.
experience. Some work experience, but not really anything significant. So, you know, you kind of like get to that point in life and you're thinking like, wow,
Nothing.
I missed all the milestones.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I'm basically screwed. And so I still remember applying to medical school and kind of thinking like, oh, in 4 years, if I graduate, like if I start med school, if I apply at 26, I could potentially get in, because the application cycle is like 1 year, and then you get in for the next year. So most people will apply their junior year of college so that they can start after their senior year. So there's like a 2-year lag time for med school. So I was like, if I apply now, I'll start med school when I'm 28 and I'll finish when I'm 32. And I remember having these thoughts that, oh my God, it's
is a
gonna
good
be too
age.
late. and like I've screwed up, right? That like I should have done this such a long time ago. But the truth of the matter is, and then what happens is our mind, once we have that kind of thought, it like demotivates us and we don't feel like doing anything. We're like, oh my God, it's too late. Like I'm GG SOL. I can't
Shit out of luck.
But the truth is that in 4 years, like I'm going to be 32 either way. Like it doesn't really matter. Like the real choice is, do I want to be like 32 and have an MD, or do I want to be 32 and not have an MD? Like that's the real choice. But that's not the way that our mind thinks about it, right? All it thinks about is all the time that's passed and all the milestones we've missed. It doesn't really think about, okay, what are the different options for when I'm 32 and which one do I want to pick? So that's really important. If y'all are like kind of feeling like you've missed out and it's too late for you, let's say you're like 25 and you've never been on a date. And then at the age of 30, you've got 2 options. So you're saying, okay, I'm 25, GG, like forever alone, right? Like finished. But then like
feels
you could say,
bad,
like,
man.
3 years from now, like you may still be alone or you could not be alone. Like which one would you prefer? And that's what you should move towards. And this is where leveling up comes in, because I don't think that, unlike RPGs, I don't think life has like diminishing, or it doesn't have like exponential more experience required to level up. So I think life is like you can just accrue skill points whenever you want to by spending time doing the activity.
Oh.
You can level up all of your crafting skills sequentially if you want to. It doesn't really matter. You can just level up whatever you put your mind to. And this kind of goes back to like learning.
My mind's blown. He's saying that real life doesn't have an XP increase like fucking RuneScape. I've kind of seen life a little bit like that. I've played it so long.
Learning past Japanese, so you can like watch anime for 4 years and learn how to say I'll never forgive you for the sake of the world, or you can just sit down and literally learn Japanese in 2 months, right? So if you spent like a dedicated amount of time studying Japanese and learning Japanese, you can like become proficient in the language in 60 days. That's all it takes. So this is the concept of deliberate practice.
Yeah, if you can focus for 2 months, just do nothing else. I would like stress about things, like if you just, how are you going to clean your house, how are you going to make food, blah 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 blah, if you're just learning Japanese. My mind would be on everything else.
Which I think Malcolm Gladwell kind of like popularized, is this idea that like if you put your mind to something, you can accumulate any kind of like skill that you want to. So it doesn't sort of matter that you've spent all of your so this is the other thing, is in life, like skill points are not limited. So in video games, like there's like, oh, we only have like 60 skill points, so how do we want to build them? And if I've spent too much time putting them into video games or like, you know, anime expertise, like I'm screwed because I've used up all my skill points.
So that's all the passive soft cap skill points.
You can farm skill points every single day. Like you can just wake up today and farm a skill point if you want to. And so that's why we see, you know, 2 kinds of people. Like there are people that will excel at many, many, many things, and people who oftentimes excel at nothing. And we'll talk about the middle ground in a second. And so the truth of the matter is that even if you've maxed all of the wrong stats, you can just start maxing up other ones, right? So this is kind of interesting. Like, I think, what was it? There's a great quote from like Rome or Sparta or something that
a great quote from Rome.
Their warriors to be scholars, and their scholars should be warriors, because if you're a warrior who hasn't studied things, you're going to be like stupid and you'll make mistakes.
Yeah.
If you're a scholar who's never fought, like your policies won't incorporate like understanding of like combat and stuff like that. So I forget exactly what the quote was, if somebody can remind me, but
yeah, but you need to be a smart gamer. You need to learn metagame and tactics and stuff like that too.
The truth of the matter is that you can exercise for 2 hours a day if you want to, and like study for 4 hours a day if you want to, right? Like you can actually do all of it. You don't, there's not a limited number of there's not a limited number of stat points that y'all have. So even if you've screwed things up, you can still invest it like in cultivating, farming more stat points today. It kind of doesn't matter.
I'm going to learn how to juggle.
Oh yeah, so this is great. So thank you very much. So someone's saying this, crap. Yeah.
I suck at juggling.
That separates its scholars from its warriors will have its thinking done by cowards and its fighting done by fools. Faraz R2, come in and clutch. That's exactly the quote that I was thinking of. So there's sort of this idea that we have that there's a limited number of stat points that we have, and if you've wasted them, you can't get more, which is not true. You can learn, you can study Japanese for 3 months and become proficient in it, and then you can go and study Mandarin, and then you can go and study
No
Hindi,
thanks.
and then you can go and study Arabic. And within the span of 1 year, you can be proficient in 4 languages. So this is kind of what we've seen in our coaching program, is that that it takes about, so if people are wondering, so if you're someone who has misused your stat points up until this point, the question that a lot of people ask is, okay, how long does it take for me to put my life together? And so this is where I would say there are a couple of different things. The first is that 8 weeks is the amount of time it takes to start moving your life in the right direction.
It's quite good.
People feel like they have inertia, lack of motivation, like they're not really doing anything. 8 weeks is the amount of time that it takes to start moving your life in the right direction. Coincidentally,
it's a long time though.
That 8 weeks is the amount of time that it takes to start to make neuroscience changes in your brain. Like if you consistently do something for a period of about 8 weeks, your brain will start to change.
8 weeks of reaction videos coming up.
Is that optimal outcomes tend to take about 12 weeks. So even in our
3
content
months.
creator program with Twitch, we've lengthened the program for 8 to 12 weeks based on a year of research. So what we sort of discovered is that people start to make change in 8 weeks, and then they're really they're really...
Okay, but I'm pretty sure I have negative skill points because I was born in an abusive household and my brain is literally broken from it. I'm laughing at that because negative skill points, but man, feels bad.
At a good pace 12 weeks in. So it takes about 3 months to start to put your life together. What we see is in a period of about 40 weeks, if you're focused and put your mind to things, you can make a drastic change to your life. So 40 weeks is like the kind of the minimum amount to turn your life around, in my experience. And what I've seen with people time and time again is about 40 weeks to 2 years is what it takes to turn your life around by 180 degrees. So I've had people who
so that you go back to being a kid again,
never had a job, making 6 figures a year in 2 years.
You start dying.
If they just put their mind to it. And so you may wonder, okay, so what is it that changes over the course of 8 to 40 weeks? What are we working on? So I'll give you guys just a couple of examples. So one is that people start working.
8 weeks is like 8 to years.
So these are the skill points that you invest in things that become super OP. So a good example is how to learn. So if you level up your learning ability, you get an XP buff across all of your different things. Other examples of the hidden curriculum are how to communicate, how to find motivation. So these core aspects of self that if you use deliberate practice on these domains, if you discover how to find motivation, how to communicate, and how to learn, then all of the things after that will become much, much, much better. Over the course of 12 to 40 weeks, what are some neuroscience changes that we see? So a good example is a change in self-talk. So if we look at why people
you start hearing voices.
There's a little voice in your head that will encourage you to not do anything, or it will discourage you from making a change because it says things like, oh, it's too late. Oh, don't bother. Look at all these other people. So there's a little voice in your head that actually is sabotaging all of your efforts.
The little brain.
So when you work with someone like a therapist or a coach for 12 weeks, 16 weeks, 20 weeks, or on your own, if you work on your self-talk, it takes time to rewire those neurons in your brain to produce a different kind of self-talk. And what I see with my therapy patients, for example, is 40 weeks into therapy, what starts to happen is they'll start to say something, and then I will ask them a question. They'll say, I knew you were going to ask that. Or I'll say something to them, and they'll be like, I knew you were going to say that. I knew that was coming. I was dreading you saying that. Even when I came into my appointment today, I was going to tell you this. I knew exactly what you would say. So that is a prime example of changing your self-talk, because then their brain is able to produce what I offer them. And so the reason
That's
that I
cool.
tend to work with people for a
when
year
you
or two is
you internalize someone else's voice in your head,
become trained in saying and thinking the way that I do, they basically learn that way of thinking, and then they no longer need me. Then they're like kind of fixed, right? So that's like literally changing your self-talk. So that's just how long it takes. Like you have to have, people will ask questions like, how do I gain confidence in myself? If they grew up in an abusive household where they were, taught to be not confident, the way that you gain that is by actually exposing yourself to people who are confident in you. So we see this in group coaching a lot, where people are
interesting.
I'm here to they don't realize this when they come in, but we're teaching them how to change their self-talk. And so that's why group coaching will see a lot of benefit that seems to happen suddenly without any warning, late in the game.
My inner voice is violent.
People just start making changes in their
Ouch.
life, and they're really no one understands how it happened. You don't see it coming. So 7 weeks, 8 weeks, people don't feel like they're making any progress, and then suddenly they kind of wake up one day and they're starting to do really well. And why is that? It's because when you go into group coaching and there are 10 people there, or 8 people, or 6 people that are changing the way that they treat you, that are treating.
That's interesting. How do you shield yourself to absorbing their mindset? Just don't be around them. Tell them, I don't want to talk about these things. It's too much for me.
Treating you in a different way, your mind sort of gets a different experience. So this is just kind of to summarize, we kind of got off track there, but generally speaking, if you feel like you've lost your, if you've wasted all your points in life and you've missed key milestones, the good news is that you can learn basically at any time. The idea of age or I'm too old for this, unless you're a woman who wants to bear children or something, there's some biological, barriers which are very hard to overcome. If you're
Woman buys bear and sicks on children.
a 75-year-old woman or a man, I suppose, and you decide that you want to have children, bear a child, there may be biological constraints. But outside of that, if you're 25, 30, 35, and you want to go back to college, you want to start becoming a game developer, whatever it is that you want to do, deliberate practice and focusing your mind on something will allow you to work on it. You can just always farm up skill points. You just have to start farming. When it comes to turning your life around, I would say 8 weeks is the amount of time it takes.
So practice. Pick things to practice on.
You should be rolling by 12 weeks. By 40 weeks, some people will have turned their life around. And give yourself 2 years of deliberate work. And basically, people will ask me, they'll come in with trauma and abuse and being on drugs and all this stuff. And they're like, my life is nowhere. I'm 26 years old. How do I fix all these problems? And I'll be like, give me 2 years. If in the worst case scenario, it's taken me about 2 years. I'm thinking about some patients of mine that have really had trauma and addictions and are unemployed and in
2 years is quite long.
20s, even early 30s, and in a 2-year time span they are in school for something that they really care about. And so I had one patient, for example, who became a plumber.
Chad
and
Pep.
So would work
People
a lot,
think.
and then was making 80 or $100 an hour, and then was also
2 years to become Chad.
So they're
from mad to Chad.
And they figured out, okay, I'm going to become a plumber. I'm going to work nights because I'm a night owl anyway. And then the upside of working nights is that 24-hour plumbing services, you get to charge more, right? Because it's you're showing up at someone's house at 3 a.m. So he'll go to someone's house at 3 a.m, work for 2 hours, and make $500.
I was once in this position, and now I am a Chad.
So he's just working on his game design. And it's a great life that he's crafted. But it takes about 2 years to get there. So, does that make sense? So at the end of the day, life is an RPG. That's totally fine. If you've wasted all your stat points in the wrong skills, that's okay too. You can just farm up more stat points. All it takes is deliberate practice and patience.
So he's basically saying it's not over until you croak it, till the fat lady sings, till you're dead, till you're in the ground, in a box. He's saying there's always time to learn, that you didn't stop learning. If you want to try, you can always get the skills. I think for some people the problem lies, they're unaware of the skills that they maybe need to build in the first place. So even though they can farm, let's say they're good farmers, they just don't know what to farm. What's the meta for life? Guess self-direction. You have to choose yourself. Pretty hard for some folks, but yeah, that was fun, Dr. K.